Okay, I've checked all my connections with my meter, and what I'm doing now is some of these upper connections on the top side of the board. I have connections at the bottom under here with the pins, and they're really connected really well. But I was noticing as I was checking my terminals here that there's some of the solder on the top part of the board. There's some holes. They're not really making a good connection. Even though everything checked, I just want to make sure I have these soldered in really, really good. So what I'm doing is I'm coming from the top side, put a little solder on my tip. It's kind of hard to get in here, but I'm just kind of getting it warm. Put a little solder so that way it'll make connection on the top of the board. And these are, like I said, it's kind of awkward to get my tip in here without burning anything else. So I get a little solder on my tip. And I get the leg warm enough for the solder to flow in, and then I'm adding a little solder, just a little dab, just to make contact. And I'm not sure if you can see this one right here. There's just a little bit of solder here, but there's nothing, not much on the leg going through the board down to the bottom. Like I said, the bottom is really good, but the top part is missing just a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm just, to avoid any kind of issues, and it takes a little time, just put a little solder on your tip, get a little hot, and then put it in there. So let me just get this one. And I have to, I'm putting my tip on the leg to the board as much as possible, and then I'm sneaking my solder through the leg to touch the tip, to put solder on the tip, and that'll increase the heat transfer just from the tip of the solder, from the tip to the solder and to the leg, just like that. So I'm trying not to burn anything. And you'll see it flow once you put your tip on the leg and you touch the solder to the tip. It'll increase the surface area of the tip with the solder, and that'll give you a little bit more heat transfer as the solder makes connection with the leg and the land of the circuit board, just like that. So not sure if you can see this or not, but putting the tip right there at the base, touch my solder to it, to the solder tip, and the solder flows into it. And like I said, everything is good on this, all the connections. And I'll kind of show you what I was doing with the solder. Testing these ports to make sure, or the legs, to make sure they're making contact with the board, and my contact points for the connections between each leg. So I just put my tip in there in the bottom corner, reach through, put a little solder on my tip, and it'll transfer the heat into the leg and the land connection on the circuit board. Just like that. There we go. So that's what I've already done on this other side here. I've already done these on the top. And then what I'm doing here, make sure you can still see that. Yeah. What I did, as you could see, I was touching the legs, excuse me, touching the legs from this side and putting a little solder on these upper connections on this board here. And I did that for the other side already. So I've got these connected up, and let me pull my meter up. And I have it set to it's set to ohms, and I have the little beeper or whatever you want to call it. So when I touch, it tells me I have connection. So I'm going to pause this for just a second so I can so as you remember my diagram, got kind of a glare. There's the board, there's the resistor right here, and this one goes to the port, if you can see that, and then that's the AC coming in. So what I'm going to do is check the pins and make sure they're going to this port. The other one's going to the fuse, and the other one's going to this side of the resistor. So that's what I'm going to check right now. So as we're looking at this, because you're going to be looking at it the way I'm testing it, the left side, or your right, will go to the port. So this first pin, I'm going to check to this port. The second middle pin, I'm going to check to that little resistor right here. The middle one goes to the fuse, which would be your power input. And then the left, right, your right, the third one will go to the resistor. I'm sorry, a little messed up this morning, but you'll see what I'm doing. So I'm going to put one of my probes on the left side, and I'm going to check to the port. And as you can see, I'm going to do this next one, next one, and then the last one. So that's the left side pin. Now the middle pin goes to the fuse. So I'm going to put my meter, let's see if you can still see, just want to make sure. Pull it up a little bit for you. There we go. So what I'm going to do is, to the input, I'm going to check the middle pin, because the middle pin is where where it comes from your AC. So I'm going to put where my input is and check the middle pins. And I'm touching the pin, not the board. So that way I know the pin of the AC controller, or Triac, whatever you want to call them, which they are Triacs. They are all making contact. So that's the middle pin checked. Now the last pin, which would be left, which is this very left side of this IC here, will go to this little resistor here. So the little resistor is right here. So I'm going to check on the pin to that little resistor. Now I'm touching the pin, not the board, just to make sure there's connection between the resistor and the leg of the IC. Because if not, you'll get a false reading with the circuit board, but the circuit board is connected. So if you put your probe on the actual leg, on the little land on the circuit board, then you're going to get a false reading. So if you put it at right underneath the black, if you see right here, I'm putting my probe like right here underneath the IC at this edge. That's where I'm touching it, and then I'm just checking that resistor on each one. So as you can tell, you could hear, I've got continuity between each leg of the IC with parts of the board that it connects to. So just make that a check, and like I said, this has taken me a little longer than a couple hours to do, but I've been working on other things at the same time. So but that way you'll make sure that each of your ICs, the legs of your ICs are connecting to the board. And as you can probably tell, let's see, I can probably see, I still haven't cut the legs yet. I'm going to make sure before I do this, I have some heatsink compound that I'm going to be applying. I have these little packs I've had for a little while. I got them on eBay. He sells them in like 50, 100, and I bought a bunch of these little packs because I don't use heatsink compound very much. But I can add a link to that, and that's the Tuxie, I guess that's what that says. And there's a little bit in here, not much. It's probably mostly air. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just get me like a little lid, little plastic, and put a bunch of these little packs onto that, and then use like my little toothpick to smear it on the back of the ICs, and that'll be for my heat transfer from the ICs to the heat sink for the board or for the ICs, and then I'll start reassembly of this after I have cut the legs. Let's see, zoom this out a little bit. So I'll cut the legs off, and I'm going to cut them off. As you can see, like on this one, it's really short. I'm just going to go through and cut these off about the same height with my wire cutters, and just kind of go snip, 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 and then do the other side, snip, snip, and get them ready to go, and I'll start reassembly.